Okay. For today, I would like to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Lydia Cumiskey. Lydia is a senior postdoctoral researcher at MaREI, the Research Ireland Center for Energy, Climate and Marine in the Environmental Research Institute at University College York. With over the past 10 years, Lydia has worked in applied research and consultancy projects in the areas of risk communication, integrated flood risk management, climate adaptation, and disaster risk reduction. Creativity and interactivity inspire Lydia's work, as well as enabling multi-stakeholder collaboration, co-creation, and partnership. Lydia currently works in a European Horizon-funded project called Directed, which is the acronym for Disaster Resilience for Extreme Climate Events, providing interoperable data, models, communication, and governance. Our role relates to developing and applying a risk governance framework and knowledge co-production process risk tandem in real-world labs across Europe to facilitate integration across disaster risk management and climate change adaptation. After Lydia's talk, we would have time for question and answer, but for now, Lydia, you have the floor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Adame, and thank you everybody for taking the time to join this webinar. I know it's nearly Easter time, so yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to just share my screen, so give me a second. Yeah, here we go. Great. Okay, so thank you, Adame, for that great introduction. So yeah, my name is Lydia. I'm based at University College Cork in Ireland, and I am primarily working on the directed EU-funded Horizon project. And part of my work in this project is kind of supporting capacity development of our real-world lab practitioner hosts. And what I'm going to present to you today is a kind of approach to understanding those different capacities and skills that have emerged from the capacity development we've been doing, and giving you some different insights into the different capacities and skills that we've noted that have been developed within our different real-world labs, and reflect on some of the challenges and lessons that we've learned through this process. And just to highlight that this work is very much not done by myself, it's done as a group of actors within the consortium, and just to acknowledge everyone in the consortium, and in particular the Stockholm Environment Institute, who are leading a lot of the capacity development work. So yes, just to go to the next slide. Yeah, so also this paper, what I'm going to talk to you about today, has recently been published in the International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction. So you can find that there. It's currently in press. The pre-proof is available, but the full version should be openly accessible in the next week or so. So most of what I'm talking about today will be in that paper, although I will present a little bit more in terms of some of the findings since what has been shared in the paper. So yeah, if you do miss anything or find it hard to follow, then everything is well documented in the paper. And you can also see our list of different co-authors and the people that were involved in the process. So yeah, just to give a bit of background, I think everybody in this working group is very familiar with the challenge that we're facing now in terms of climate change, which is increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme climate and weather events, and this need for more disaster resilience, which is really what Directed is trying to support. There's a growing complexity, growing vulnerabilities, multi-hazard compound events, there's fragmented risk governance, and a real need for integration and interoperability. And we're trying to address this challenge in the Directed project. And we're trying to look at the integration of disaster risk management and climate change adaptation, and support more integrated solutions and more interoperable solutions. So bridging that kind of space of data models and tools and communication and governance. And for us, the capacity development is a really important part of that through the real world lab. So I'll talk through more of that today. And yeah, knowledge co-production. So we see knowledge co-production through our real world labs at the local level as a really important process for supporting kind of solution identification, but also relationship building and yeah, knowledge sharing to enable local actors to better manage risks and adapt to climate change. For those who are also working in the knowledge co-production and co-creation space, I know a lot of people in this group are, we followed the definition of knowledge co-production from Nordstrom, and their different principles is also what we've been following. So Nordstrom defines it as the iterative and collaborative process involving diverse types of expertise, knowledge, and actors to produce context-specific knowledge and pathways towards a sustainable future. So that is the definition that we follow. But then we also, within our reward labs, you know, very similarly, but we're kind of focusing on bringing together the stakeholders to produce information on shared issues. So this is around disaster risk and climate adaptation, bringing together diverse groups of discipline sectors, skills, and knowledge types in each of the reward labs. And try to enable non-hierarchical collaboration, innovation, and equity to support these shared outcomes and encourage experimentation and creativity. So for us, the knowledge co-creation, the process or the means for achieving that is through these real world labs, which are led by practitioner hosts in the different countries. And I'm going to talk through that next. So here you will get an overview of the different real world labs in Directed. So first we have the capital region of Denmark, and that's led by a regional organization called Region Hovedstaden. And it also has a technical support partner from the Technical University of Denmark, and they are primarily focusing on flooding, but also looking at storms and droughts. Then we have the Rhine-Erft region. So this is led by the Water Board, the Erftverband, and they don't have an additional technical partner. Then we have the Danube region. So this kind of has two sub-labs. So there's a focus on Vienna and there's a focus on Zala in Hungary. And there we have a reinsurance company, Galliard & Co., more focused on the Vienna case, and then Zala Special Rescue Team, which is a first responder volunteer organization. They are focusing on the Zala region. And then in Emilia-Romagna in Italy, we have the civil protection of the Emilia-Romagna region, and then we also have the Regional Agency for Prevention, Environment and Energy, and there is a supporting technical partner there who is a research consultancy organization, GECO Sistema. So that will give you an overview of the four different labs that we have and the kind of hosts. And these are very much the practitioner hosts. And that's who the capacity development in Directed is primarily focusing on. But it also has ripple effects out to all of the different consortium partners. And yeah, as the consortium, we're kind of supporting the different reward lab hosts with capacity development activities and with our expertise overall. So from the modeling side over to the communication and governance side. And yeah, so overall, the knowledge co-production activities that are happening in the reward lab, these are some very specific things for the project. So two of the kind of innovations that are coming from the project is the risk tandem framework, which is more of a governance framework, and within that is actually the co-production process itself. So we're kind of supporting the application of that framework and also the co-development and application of technical tools through the data fabric. So that's something that will emerge from each real world lab at the end of the project. And then overall, this capacity development within the real world labs through this process will support kind of sustained engagement. And yeah, so the project, I should have mentioned earlier, started in October 2022 and will run for 4 years. So we have about a year and a bit left at the project. So each of the labs are kind of already established. So next, yeah, so just to give you a bit of a kind of insight into the capacity development program. So this was a focus for the Directed project to build capacity for knowledge co-production in the real world labs. This is being led by SEI, Stockholm Environment Institute, Oxford, and it's kind of structured by the tandem framework. So this is a framework for knowledge co-production, which has been applied a lot in climate services. And this is also embedded into our risk tandem framework. And basically each real world lab is kind of supporting is kind of applying a learning by doing approach of that framework. So it's scoping phase, co-exploration, co-design, and kind of influencing phase. And our capacity development program is kind of supporting each of the labs to run through those different phases. And our overall capacity development is very much focused on two-way learning and exchange, and very much adapting to the needs as the labs roll through this co-production process. So we didn't have a fixed, we're going to run X modules, we're going to give X guidance sheets and X trainings, and that's going to be it. So it's very much us learning what do the labs need and responding to that. So it's been a very kind of supportive type engagement. So we had a lot of scoping consultations before different events or activities that the labs were running. And we then designed different capacity development modules and ran trainings online and in person in response to those. And then we do a lot of or a lot of evaluation with the labs. So after their workshops, we will do debriefing sessions, and then we also allow them to self-reflect on their capacity development, and then that will further inform more modules. So yeah, it's a very much kind of evolutionary, iterative approach to the capacity development. And this is what we've developed in terms of the knowledge co-production capacities and skills framing or structure. So this is what I'll talk through in the next 10 minutes or so. So this kind of emerged through that process of the capacity development, understanding what the needs were and what skills were kind of being developed. So we framed this as collaborative capacity, systems thinking capacity, creative capacity, and reflective capacity. And then within each of these capacities, we've defined different skills. So facilitation skills, research skills, and design skills that are needed in order to support knowledge co-production implementation at the local level. So I'll talk through some of these. Now this table, I know there's a lot of detail here, so you'll find all of this in the paper. So I won't talk through every bit of it, but just so you know how this is structured and where you can find it. So if we were looking at the collaborative capacity, so the types of design skills, so they would need to think about how do they design an engagement mechanism. So in our case, that was a real world lab. How do they initiate that? How do they pick their stakeholders to involve? How do they make sure that it's a neutral space, that it's a respectful space, that they have the right stakeholders involved? So these types of things, in terms of research mapping, they want to understand and map the different stakeholders, who could they involve. And then in terms of facilitation, it's really important that they're facilitating inclusive methods, that they're working toward the common goal, ensuring voices are being heard, surface and navigate tensions, these types of things. So these are the type of skills that they need to build. And then through the capacity development, it's trying to understand how can we give them methods and tools and exercises to support that, and for them to really learn by doing in their labs themselves. And what we've also done, which I forgot to mention in the last slide, is we've linked these skills and capacities to different co-production principles. So like those of Nordstrom, but also some other literature on principles of knowledge co-production. So this is kind of saying what this means for knowledge co-production. So if you have collaborative capacity and you have these skills, you're going to enable knowledge co-production that's more transdisciplinary, goal-oriented, non-hierarchical, etc. So that's the way that we've kind of framed the different skills linked to principles. Then in terms of systems thinking capacity, so this is methods and tools to support more systems interactions, understanding of dependencies and uncertainties, research to understand the different governance contexts. So here, for example, a lot of the labs did surveys and interviews with their stakeholders to try and understand the whole system as a whole, and then to facilitate different methods to actually understand and map, and a lot of sticky notes and arrows and these types of activities to understand also that leverage points for change. And then creative capacity. So this is one that's close to my heart and one that I've been trying to encourage a lot within the real world lab. So this is really to enable that principle around interactivity, so that these engagements are very fluid and experimental, and support innovation, support out of the box type of thinking, but also build curiosity and empathy. So really trying to bring in the human element into the room, when often I feel like a lot of professionals can have a very professional facade, and sometimes we need to open up more the human nature and enable things like play. So yeah, they were the types of methods that we were encouraging, so artistic methods to support knowledge exchange and experimentation. And then in terms of reflexive capacity, so this is very much about building in that critical evaluation, that critical reflection, and always thinking, how can we adapt, how can we improve, how can we iterate, to ensure that we are really enabling the true transdisciplinary process. So this, in terms of designing different methods, allowing themselves to kind of critically reflect themselves, but then also with the group, and support more mutual learning within the stakeholders. So this one is very important, and we feel like it's going to emerge even more so as we move towards the end of the project. So now I'll just give you a little insight into each of the different capacities and some things that we kind of found, and I'll highlight some of the different training activities that we did around these. So overall, in terms of collaborative capacity, each of the labs successfully were established. Some of them focused more on a bit more levels of formalization. So some of them really had letters of support from all of their stakeholders. Others allowed a little bit more flexibility. There's around 10 to 15 agencies involved in different real world labs. They're primarily government agencies at different levels, but also some private sector and some NGO type or volunteer related organizations as well. And each of the labs kind of had their own specific focus based on their priorities for around hazards or for specific types of collaboration they wanted to enable. So for example, in the capital region of Denmark, there's quite a complicated boundary overlap between the emergency management agencies and municipalities, and this is kind of set up differently in different areas, and one of their goals was to really try and bring all of them together because they usually don't get to talk. So that was a focus, and then gradually they brought in some other actors where they felt it was relevant, but that was kind of a starting hook for them. And in terms of citizen engagement, so if we want to be true to transdisciplinary collaboration, we were also encouraging citizen engagement in the different real world labs. This is a challenge because of the mandates of some of our real world lab hosts. It's not their mandate, it might be the municipality's mandate for citizen engagement. So we definitely see a staged approach. We see opportunities emerging now for more citizen engagement in the labs, and that's something that can be advanced. And the Emilia-Romagna Real World Lab, because they have quite an extremely strong volunteer network, that was a good entry point for them in terms of citizen engagement, but it is a challenge, to be honest, in the other real world labs. And the type of guidance, we gave a lot of guidance notes at this stage for the collaborative capacity, and a lot of one-to-one support to work through specific issues and plans for different workshops. So I would say this is something that kind of nearly cross-cuts a lot of the training, but here it was more focused on different guidance notes on that. Then in terms of building systems thinking capacity, so we did an in-person training. This is MaREI. I don't know if you're familiar with MaREI, but we use it an awful lot in the directed project. So we ran an online training to try and help the real world lab hosts to understand how they could map the system and understand the different elements, both from the different drivers of risk, but also then the different kind of how that links to risk governance. And then we also did a kind of World Cafe exercise in person during one of the GAs. And there they kind of got a bit more training in terms of how to map different barriers and enablers related to governance, communication, data models and tools. And this really influenced the Emilia-Romagna Real World Lab. So here you can see in the top picture, this was their very first meeting, which, in a lot of real world labs, they needed to kind of meet the stakeholders where they are, and this is how they usually interact. So the first meeting was quite formal. Then they received this training and also learned a lot through the project in general. And then their next workshop was a lot more interactive, as you can see in photo B and C. So they applied this MaREI method and they worked through that with their stakeholders, facilitating much more of a knowledge co-production kind of process with their stakeholders. So that was a really nice outcome to see, and the strength of their kind of capacities and skills to design these methods and facilitate them themselves. And then additionally on the, system thing, creative capacity. Yes, so for creative capacity, we also ran an in-person workshop in Cologne. We had a part of that workshop was focused on applying the Breaking the Silos game. And using this with the whole consortium as a whole, and this is where an event happens and you need to make decisions, you need to collaborate. So this was a good way of thinking actually about that empathy piece, and understanding how people make decisions. This helped to stimulate some interest in games in general in the real world labs, or to think how they could use role play in their real world labs. And also as part of that exercise, we supported the real world labs to kind of co-explore using play, creative materials. And then on the right hand side, you'll see how the Rhine Earths then kind of learned from this game actually was hosted in the Rhine Earth and in the Earthsverband in the water board, and they really got inspired by this, and they then decided to implement a stakeholder workshop that was mapping different communication flows and a lot more interactive. And you could see a big difference between this in their first workshops as well. They were again more formal and traditional, and they really then took the leap and decided to do this more interactive approach. And just to highlight as well, I didn't specify maybe at the start, is that us as trainers or supporting, we don't plan to be at any of these workshops. So these are very much led by the regions themselves. Yeah, so that was a nice outcome. And then additionally, in terms of the creative capacity, so I mentioned that we kind of, in the training, we were applying this kind of creative play methods, and I was encouraging the real world lab hosts to, you know, consider different ways to think about their target groups and to think about how to develop solutions to their target groups. And during that training, the smaller circle there, you can see this is what somebody had produced for a municipality. So highlighting that a municipality has many different arms and many different roles, and sometimes it can be hard for them to do everything in terms of managing different priorities. And yeah, that was representative of a mayor from a municipality. And then this isn't in the paper, but this is a workshop that just happened a month ago in the Zala region, where we also got them to play and to use creative materials to introduce themselves. So a very simple approach. You know, what does disaster resilience mean for you in Zala? And, you know, there we really took people out of their comfort zone. People are not used to working like this at all in Hungary. And we got really positive feedback, and it really kind of warmed people up for discussion in the workshop and allowed people to highlight things and remember things by seeing it, rather than words and more words, which can often be the case in workshops. So here you can see there are 3 mayors there actually. And yeah, one of them is highlighting the complexity, the messiness of everything and trying to figure it all out. And others produced a lot about the connectivity and highlighted different important kind of themes that would support their collaboration going forward. So yeah, just to give you some insights into the creative capacity. And then reflexive capacity. So overall, this is kind of built into how our capacity development program was working. So, you know, we were having those debriefings and we had self-reflection sheets after each workshop. And the quote there you'll see, for example, this is from one of the real world lab hosts who was kind of able to reflect on that, you know, people were engaged, it worked, the interactive methods were really good. And they were happy with the workshop, but I felt like I didn't collect all the relevant information, and that's a challenge from the host to themselves, feeling like this worked, but maybe in terms of the documentation and making sure that, you know, people write down what they're talking in the smaller groups. Sometimes it doesn't all end up on the page, and sometimes there's more reasons for that people don't feel comfortable sharing some things that they might be comfortable sharing one-to-one. So that was a kind of reflective observation from her. Also in terms of reflexive capacity, we're noticing that the real world labs really need to adapt to unforeseen circumstances. So there's been a lot of staff turnover in the Danish case. So they need to adapt, they need to re-establish relationships, they need to again kind of understand what are the priorities, are the priorities changing? And they did quite well with that, and they decided to run a set of interviews to build up those relationships and then to also understand the system better. And also on the other side, to respond to windows of opportunity. So for example, the pictures I just showed, one of them is the mayor of Keste in Hungary, and he is very forward thinking and really encouraging this type of activity. And so that was a really good way for us to actually, an entry point for us to work with him and to hold a multi-stakeholder workshop, which was before this very difficult in Hungary. Yeah, labs were encouraged to use feedback forms and collect direct feedback from participants. And yeah, overall this capacity, it's quite intertwined. All of the capacities are quite intertwined, but I think this one especially so. And I think that link between the systems thinking and reflective capacity, that hopefully this reflexive capacity can help them to understand where are these different entry points. So as we move forward with the projects and we work on developing those technical and governance solutions, that they can really be quite critical and reflective and think about where can we influence the system to create that policy or practical change. So I expect this one to emerge more so as we go through the project. And this is my last slide, just to let you know. So yeah, key lessons. So overall, I think it's a nice way to frame these capacities, and I think they're very evident and necessary for the knowledge co-production at the local level. But they're also what we learned, which we didn't really set out because this capacity development program was for the hosts, but also what we learned is that these are quite relevant for the academic researchers supporting them and the technical partners supporting them too, because we have a lot of modelers involved. So that's something we'd like to kind of track going forward, is the influence on the academic side of things and the other partners, not just the hosts. And yeah, I think overall these transdisciplinary projects like Directed, they really have potential to build these capacities to sustain that knowledge and engagement. And even if, these people transfer to different agencies, they have these skills which are very transferable too. So I think it's very much worth investing in these individuals in the project. Overall, the approach to capacity development, we felt that worked quite well, this two-way learning approach and adapting and responding to the needs and not having a very fixed plan. Sometimes these kind of cultural barriers or perceived barriers can really limit or hinder some of the capacity development. Maybe some fear around facilitating some methods. So for example, the creative stuff in Zala, but also even just being a bit nervous to even organize a multi-stakeholder workshop, because that's not really the norm in your context. So kind of helping the labs to overcome some of these hurdles, which might be cultural or they might be individual. And yeah, also the external influences, like I said, will have an influence. So kind of being ready for that it might mean that, you've built the capacity of one person and now there's a new person. So you might need to start again with some of the training. And, policy and regulation things change. So for example, the Danish Reword Lab now will no longer continue. So that role will kind of be taken over by the Danish Technical University. So again, we have to kind of adapt and be flexible and think about where that capacity is and how we can support it. Overall, it takes time. I mean, you all know this, that knowledge production takes time, but also the capacity development takes time. And I think you have to work with that. And what we found was really helpful, especially in Denmark and in Emilia-Romagna, is having that locally based technical support. So if I was to design another project, I would definitely try to have like practitioners who are leading, but then also local universities who can support on the technical and engagement side as well. I think it really helps. And then us as a consortium, like I said, we weren't going to all of these different workshops, but we are available if there's really a need. So for example, in Zala in Hungary, I went there to really try and support them to initiate that initial workshop, but it's more on a real need basis than it being standard across all. And we expect maybe that changes a bit as we go forward, that they might need certain support in terms of certain solution development. Yeah. So that's it for me. Just a reminder again that oh, sorry, I realized I didn't change the slide for the last one. Sorry. So this is what I was just talking about in terms of the key lessons. You can just have another look there. And then yeah, just to wrap up again, that the paper is available. You should be able to just find it quickly. It's not fully finished yet, but the pre-proof is available and it will be open access. And yeah, I'd love to know if you have any questions or if you'd like to know any more information about the project or the capacities. And if not, I will have a question for you. I'd love to know more about if these capacities actually make sense to you and the work you're doing, and with stakeholders and with academics. is there anything kind of confusing about the capacities? Does it make sense? Yeah, I'd love to know more from you. So yeah, hand back over to you, Adame.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Lydia. I mean, that was very insightful, and I hope would have some moment to interact and discuss some of the things you've talked about. Is there anyone with questions? Do you have any questions for Dr. Lydia? I have two questions, but let me see if you have questions, you can just unmute yourself and then ask your question. Okay. While perhaps others are thinking about it, I just want to ask two questions about knowledge mobilization. I know this is a thing that is coming up now, mostly in proposals and all that. How did you design the idea around knowledge mobilization for this project, especially beyond the basic research that we know publications and all that? How was that conceived, within perhaps the proposal phase and then the implementation of this project itself? The second thing has to do with the evaluation. I know the project is still ongoing, but then how do you plan to measure the evaluation and perhaps the systemic change or changes that you think the capacity that is being built will really have, within academia and then beyond that, other stakeholders as well? Thank you. There's also a question here. Let me just read that as well. Is there also projects outside of the EU? And if yes, how would you adapt these systems to maybe even further cultural scenarios or sceneries? Yes.
Great questions. Okay, where to start? Maybe I'll start with Kobe's in the chat. So I would expect there are also other projects that are working on knowledge co-production outside the EU, but our project is very much only focused on the EU context. And I think that the capacity and skills framework is flexible enough that it would also work in a global context or in a non-EU context. But I think maybe the capacity development program, I think again it comes down to a lot of this bilateral support. So I think the importance of being locally based. So if you had a kind of capacity development program that was very much local, that was person you were there, you were able to support in person, I think that would help a lot. I think that's a challenge for us trying to run this without being there directly. And I think, again, what I said about that setup between universities, technical partners and partners with more communication and governance or engagement expertise, I think setting that up would be quite important to enable that true kind of capacity development and support real world labs in that context. And maybe your question also related to that setup of a real world lab, would that work abroad? I think it would. Really, it's a multi-stakeholder kind of collaboration that can be formalized or informal. So I think it would also work. And just to also highlight that the tandem framework for knowledge co-production, that has been applied actually very much in the African setting for climate services. So the knowledge co-production definitely is applicable, but here it's the first time we've kind of framed this capacities for knowledge co-production and the development around there. So I hope that answers your question. And Adame, for your questions in terms of the knowledge mobilization at the proposal phase. So I think it's important maybe to highlight that this project directed is an EU innovation action. So it is important that we produce research and that we produce papers, but it's not really the primary thing. They want to see impact. So in the way that EU proposals are designed, you need to specify the different types of outcomes you're going to have an impact on really a lot of the EU projects like this really want to have an influence on policy and to guide kind of local practice on disasters. So yeah, I think in the proposal phase, I think maybe who you're even searching for your funding from will have an influence on that, and how that knowledge can get mobilized both locally and at the EU level. And then in terms of the evaluation, that's a very good question that is embedded, let's say, one within the capacity development. So there's a capacity development needs assessment, capacity development assessment. So that wasn't part of this paper, but that has already gone around, where we're trying to map out how these capacities have developed for the different real world lab hosts. So there will be a kind of evaluation of the capacity development done at the end. But then also in terms of the broader kind of systems change that you were mentioning. So I didn't go into much in terms of the risk tandem framework, but within that, monitoring and evaluation is an important piece. So there will be, interviews and kind of discussions with the different real world lab hosts and the different real world lab stakeholders to try and map out what the impact has been. And ultimately, by applying the risk tandem framework, what we're trying to do is to support the labs to develop governance solutions and technical solutions. So we will be able to kind of map, okay, what solutions have been produced from this process and how can they be embedded into local policies, or how could they be adapted into future projects. So we'll try and map out those kind of pathways to impact from the project. Yeah, I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much for providing those key answers. I don't know if there's any other question.
I have a question about the stakeholder involvement. I'm curious how this framework considers the involvement of the local residents in terms of their coping capacity and recovery capacity during and after the disasters, and is that via those local experts and policymakers, or you have like different channels for their involvements for the local knowledge?
Yeah, that's a that's a really good question. I suppose with the real world lab focus and the labs being hosted by practitioners, their emphasis has kind of emerged that they've focused more on the stakeholder professional groups, let's say, for the engagement. And we had encouraged a lot of citizen engagement to see how could they also involve citizens or citizen representative groups in their labs or volunteer associations. And that did happen in Emilia-Romagna, where they have a good volunteer network. That they ran, for example, a flood exercise, a simulation exercise with the volunteers as part of one of the real world lab activities. But I'll be honest, I think there's still a lot more to do in the citizen engagement, and I think it's nearly a whole other approach, if I'm really honest with you. So I'm also working on another project called the Blueprint Project, and we've worked with communities who've been affected by flooding, and they, through a co-creation process, created different risk communication outputs, poetry and song. And that was a very intense process where the government actors were involved, the research actors were involved, but it was very much focused on the communities being at the core and the center of that. And I think I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions on this and other EU projects, because I find it's very difficult to do both. And I feel from our real world lab stakeholders, they want to at least get the kind of messiness of the fragmented decision makers and professionals who are all responsible for disaster risk management, get them on the same page, and then figure out what's the next stage. Okay, what could we do better for citizen engagement? And like, it might emerge from one of the real world labs that they need to do better in citizen engagement, and then they start to look at how they could do that. But I think within this project, it's too much to expect that we would have the kind of in-depth citizen engagement happening in parallel with the professional engagement. It just hasn't, it's just difficult to do both at the same time. And that's where I kind of said that staged approach is kind of what's needed. Or if there was another project in parallel that had a strong focus on that, and then they could kind of interlink. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I fully agree with your impression on the parallel systems, because we just finished the sort of like risk dialogues with the local residents. But
Oh,
that's
nice.
Totally missing the official part of the picture. So I also
Yes.
think the same, like if you have both on the table, then it's going to be a bit messy and fragmented situation. Yeah, but
Exactly. There can be some tensions, and then you really have to navigate that, and it can sometimes may even make things more complicated. So it's
yeah.
trying to navigate that. And I think often it can be easy to just, I suppose, criticize, like, okay, there's no citizen engagement, or you need citizen engagement. But I think if you're going to do citizen engagement, you need to do it right, and you need to do it properly.
Yeah. And now we sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we thought might figuring out the local decision-making system could help the embedding or the incorporation of those two systems, because we had a project in China, and we used the responsible planner system in Beijing. That's a system that that calls for the efforts from the planners who works as the mediators to cooperate with both the citizens and the officials. So we thought it might help to solve the solutions, but we didn't try to see how this system can work out in terms of the risk management. But we thought it might be a solution, like to find some mediators in the middle.
Exactly. I think those boundary spanning people, interfacing people are really, really important. Yeah, that's really nice. If you have any more information on that work that you did, if you want to share, so be happy to look at it.
Okay, thank you very much once again. Just a quick one. Is there any way, I mean, I have this question sent to me directly. Is there any way one would get in contact, with this project, either as a partner or an employee?
Is that question for me, Adame, in terms of
Yes,
the directed, or is that for?
yeah, it was sent to me but directed,
Yes, yeah,
but for
sure.
you, yeah. Is there a way
So
to?
I'm gonna share the project website. You can contact me. So I'll put my email in the chat if there's something in particular you wanted to talk about. Our coordinator, you could also speak with, or I could link you with specific partners to discuss specific elements of it. But feel free to drop me an email. You can follow us follow the website. There's some different news items, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and these kind of things as well. There'll be some different project updates.
All right, thank you very much. We are running now for time. Thank you once again, Dr. Lydia. It's been a wonderful time listening to you and also engaging with you. And then just so for us to know, this recording will be made available on YouTube, and you can always listen to it over and over again. But just to say that the working group itself will be having a side event during the forthcoming EGU that starts next week, yes. But we'll be meeting the 1st of May at one of the rooms, room 2.43, for other ideas for the working group, papers, proposals, and some other things. So if you will be coming around for the program, please be on the lookout for that, and then try to get in touch with the working group leaders for other things. We'd also like to mention that we'll be sending out calls for those who be willing to participate in the second phase of this webinar series. That'll be starting much later in the year. So if your students, graduate students, they have things, that they want to share around co-creation, water knowledge, co-production, and all that, please kindly reach out to us, myself or Lydia. Then we'll start putting people into schedules so that we can have now a robust discussion. Before I go, I would just once again like to appreciate everyone for coming around, and then also Dr. Lydia for the wonderful talk. And hopefully we can still take this conversation forward. You can reach out to her, and then you can also download the paper to read. With that, I would say have a wonderful day. My own day is just starting, but have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll be meeting very soon. I don't know if there's any other comments from Lydia before we call it a day.
Oh, that's good. Thanks so much, Edmee. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to meeting you all somewhere someday or else online.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye.